This is internationally best-selling indie author Michael Brent Collings inviting you to join me at bestsellerlife.com/DCR to unlock my tips, tricks, and hacks for a successful writing career. So go to bestsellerlife.com/DCR and kickstart your writing adventure today.
This is Daniel.
And this is Krebs.
This is Alton.
And I am Matai.
And you're listening to Dungeon Crawlers Radio, the greatest geek podcast out there. Welcome, Dungeon Crawlers, to another exciting episode. Again, as I mentioned last episode, or Minisode, as we're calling these ones, we said we're going to do something a little bit different. It's kind of going to be a serial type thing, where the last episode I started it, and this episode, we're going to have Matai's take on the myth, the stories, the wonderfulness surrounding Christmas and Saint Nick, that jolly old fellow. So, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Matai to give his 2 cents, and then we'll turn it over to Krebs in next week's episode. But until then, I'll catch you next time. It's time for Matai.
All right, Dungeon Crawlers, it's Matai here with my hot take on the traditions of Christmas. St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, Kris Kringle, whatever you call him. Daniel's already covered the ground on the Rankin Bass Christmas specials, which were always my favorites. I loved those things. Even as a child, I knew that they were old. Those were old specials. They didn't quite have the cool whiz-bang special effects that I was used to as an 80s child, said with great irony. And even now, looking back on them, yeah, they kind of look dated, but that's their charm. That is what makes it so great. And I love that. You can always seem to find the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer one, but what about as Daniel brought up, the story of Kris Kringle, of how Santa Claus is coming to town? What about the sequel to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? There were all these other great stories done in the same style. And man, anything that stars Burl Ives or has his voice, I'm in. Listening to that man talk or sing is like cuddling up with a hot mug of cocoa, and just, it's everything Christmassy to me. Loved that. So those specials were a big part of my childhood, and hopefully yours too, and you understand the nostalgic feelings I'm talking about. For me, Christmas has always been about getting family together. When we were young, the family would come in from wherever they were living, in other states, other cities. Everybody would gather at my grandparents' house. And I can remember there being, stacks of presents everywhere, we had such a large family that the presents really kind of stacked up. But then as we would unwrap it, they had a roaring fire going in the fireplace. And I remember the room just being nice and warm and comfortable. And as we would unwrap things, the wrapping paper would go into the fireplace. Now, this was the 80s, and today we know that burning paper and its dyes may not actually do great things for the environment, but man, you can't beat the ambiance of having that in a old fireplace. I loved that. Anyway, as part of Dungeon Crawler's pursuit of giving you the story behind the story, I was reminded of a time when I was in high school, and we were tasked with delivering an oral report in history of an actual historical person that made an impact on the world. And so, being the smart aleck Weisenheimer that I was, I thought, I'm going to choose St. Nicholas, and I'm going to do a report on Santa Claus, basically. And so I went and did some research and actually found some very interesting things, most of which I have forgotten at this point in my life. But I went back and, based on what I did remember, did a little more digging and came up with some interesting stuff. And Dungeon Crawlers, I bring this interesting trivia to you. The story of St. Nicholas. Well, St. Nicholas was the Bishop of Myra. He was born in Myra, which is a city near modern-day Turkey, but back then it was populated by Greek people. So Saint Nicholas is actually Greek. And as a child, he was orphaned. His parents died of an epidemic when he was quite young, and he was raised by his uncle. But his parents left him quite a fortune. But he had already determined to follow the counsel of Jesus Christ, to sell all that you have, give to the poor, and that was how the best way to get to heaven. And so he never really spent this great wealth, but lived a very Spartan life. He's known as the patron saint of children, and as we get into his story, you'll find out why. And interestingly, also known as the patron saint of sailors. As he was growing up, he was persecuted for his Christian faith by the Romans, and then later, when a new Roman emperor came to power, he was released. But he stayed true to his faith, and later became the bishop of the church in Myra. Now, on one occasion, he met a father who had 3 daughters, and they were very, very poor. The father could produce no dowry for his daughters, which meant it was unlikely they would be able to get married, and they were likely to be sold into slavery or worse. So St. Nicholas went and took his own inheritance and sold it, and was able to come up with 3 bags of gold, which he tossed through an open window, and they landed in stockings which were hung by the fire to dry. And with this dowry, the father was able to negotiate good husbands for his daughters, and they were spared from slavery. This is definitely very much a 4th century thing, so try not to judge it too harshly with your 21st century eyes. But this was quite a miracle, quite a blessing to this young family in the 4th century. Now, another time, there's another miracle that people talk about with St. Nicholas, where they claim that he restored 3 murdered children to life. But the Catholic Church disputes this miracle, saying that somebody saw a picture of St. Nicholas with the 3 bags of gold and misconstrued it to be 3 decapitated heads of children. However, one miracle the Catholic Church does substantiate tells of 3 church officers who were imprisoned on false charges and sentenced to death. That night, the 3 of them prayed to St. Nicholas to free them, and the very same night, both Emperor Constantine and the Roman prefect that had arrested the men had the same dream, where St. Nicholas appeared to them and told them that the men were innocent and threatened God's wrath if they didn't release them. The next day, when the emperor and the prefect spoke and found that they had the same dream, they then sent for the prisoners. And they asked the prisoners what they had done. The prisoners said that they had prayed to St. Nicholas the night before. And when the men realized that was the very same man that had appeared to them in their dreams, meaning the emperor and the prefect, the emperor immediately granted them clemency and released them, but he sent them away with a letter to be delivered to St. Nicholas, asking him to please stop troubling his dreams and pray for world peace instead. So St. Nicholas was known for his generosity and kindness, especially to children. Throughout his life, he mainly did his acts of kindness in secret, never seeking any credit. Anything that was attributed to him was usually found out by accident by other people. So he was known for being a very humble and secretive man in that regards. The Feast of St. Nicholas is held on December 6th, which is generally regarded as the day of his death. And it's an occasion for people to exchange gifts, and especially to give gifts to children in his memory. Now, St. Nicholas was popular in various places in Europe, but none more so than in Holland. And the Dutch called him, taking St. Nicholas, and as it kind of became twisted in their own language, he became known as Sinterklaas. And they took that tradition with them when they settled in New Amsterdam in the American colonies. As many of you may know, New Amsterdam became New York City. And with the American penchant for mispronouncing foreign words and then adopting them as their own, they turned Sinterklaas into Santa Claus. Now, the modern day image we have of a jolly Nordic fat man in red that gives gifts to well-behaved children grew mainly out of the literature of the 19th century in Europe and the United States, not the least of which was "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," where a lot of our imagery and traditions of Santa Claus comes from. So it's kind of just, the legend has grown, as myths and legends often do. But all of it traces back to the Bishop of Myra, Saint Nicholas. And this raises an interesting point. When somebody asks you, is Santa Claus real? Well, there's a few ways of answering that question. Because Saint Nicholas was a real person who did real good deeds. He gave gifts, he helped people, he did things in secret, often by night, stuck things in stockings, helped children, and so is there a real Santa Claus? Well, perhaps some of the trappings and the stories that have grown about him may not be completely true, but they are based on something that is true. And for me personally, Dungeon Crawlers, I just want to share with you that I do believe in the spirit of Christmas. St. Nicholas, as a Christian and a believer in Christ, I don't find that to be incompatible with Christmas being a celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ and having a man named Santa Claus that comes and delivers gifts to children. I find those two principles to be in harmony with one another. As Jesus said, "Let the little children come unto me," and he urged his followers to become like little children. A lot of that innocence and the complete faith that children have towards Santa Claus can also benefit the grown-ups in their journeys of faith. Whatever they do to pursue virtue and that which is good, that to me is the spirit of Christmas. And I wish all of you a wonderful holiday season. I hope this information in this story has been of interest to you. And Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
What happens when modern magic, high-tech weaponry, and an unstoppable dragon collide? Find out in the epic audiobook of A Dragon's Fate, brought to life by Daniel and Krebs. This Whitney Award finalist novel will pull you into a pulse-pounding world where a secret cabal battles for power, and a dragon could bring everything to an explosive end. Don't just hear the story. Feel the magic, the danger, and the action. Get ready for a ride you won't forget. Grab your copy of A Dragon's Fate, now available on Audible.